Right, let's start then. I'm here to take your questions. Hello. Yeah, I think it's really important to note that had we not stepped in and reduced the fuel excise duty and road user charges, this would be a higher number that we were facing today. So I think that's had a material impact on what New Zealanders are seeing here. Obviously, our job is to make sure we support those, particularly on low and middle incomes, to be able to deal with these kinds of price rises. In addition to that, we need to look at some of the root causes of price increases. And for example, that's why we initiated the inquiry into supermarket competition and why we're going to be following through on that. It's also why some of our longer term policies matter, removing our dependence on oil by moving to the electrification of our vehicle fleet, things like the clean car discount and supporting that. So there are short term and long term things we can do to help New Zealanders through this, but fundamentally this remains an inflation situation that's driven by global factors.
Are we going to see more in the budget for people then? Because people need that short-term relief.
Well, I'm obviously not going to announce the budget today. What I do know for sure is that untargeted tax cuts are not the answer. When we're putting a budget together, we have to balance a number of different considerations, both what's happening in the short term, but also the longer term things that will support New Zealanders. That means a properly functioning health system. That means investing in transport and infrastructure. And we have signalled that in this budget, a major priority for us will be rebuilding New Zealand's health system so that wherever you live in New Zealand, you can get quality health services. Well, obviously that's driven in large part by building materials, and there is significant demand in the New Zealand economy. Our economy has recovered well through COVID-19. Normally the demand for construction that we're seeing would be met by the supply of building materials coming in. Because of the supply chain constraints we're seeing internationally, we're not able to meet that, and you are seeing prices rise there. We do know that those supply chain constraints will eventually come off, but yes, at the moment in the construction market, there are some serious bottlenecks.
We expect responsibility at all for this.
Well, what I take responsibility for is making sure that we manage our resources carefully. And what I'd ask is, what spending do people not want us to undertake? If you're thinking about the kinds of spending that a government might do that would be big enough to really have an impact on inflation, you're thinking about things like the wage subsidy scheme. Is that what people are saying we shouldn't have done? So if people have got criticism of our spending, by all means let's debate that. But if it comes to inflation per se, we need to be careful, we need to be balanced. That's what we've been over the whole 4 years that we've been in government.
Maybe you could give an example of where you have tightened about.
Well, we've reprioritised money throughout our time in government. We saved $1 billion in the last budget that we were able to bring back. So we do that every single day. We seek value for money in the investments that we make on behalf of New Zealanders. But the point I'm making is, there's no free lunch here. If people are saying that, if the National Party is saying that, what are they going to cut? Are they not going to make sure that New Zealanders can receive health services wherever they live that are in New Zealand that are of high quality, and that they would prefer tax cuts for people who earn more than $180,000? That's a debate, but there isn't a free lunch here.
Were you expecting the number to clip 7 today?
Look, most forecasters, most commentators had said 7 or above. Where we've landed around 6.9 is obviously lower than the UK and the US. We'll see where Australia's number gets to next week. As I said before, I think we've made a material difference with the fuel excise duty. That's not only saved New Zealanders, up to $17 a refill, it's also, I'm sure if you ask, commentators would say it's had an impact on the overall inflation number.
Would you consider reducing your planned future spending or money you're spending in the budget in next year? Because that's another option.
Yeah, again, this is one of the nature of these kinds of releases. This is backward-looking data, and that's how it works. So we can't change what happened up to the end of the March quarter. When we put a budget together, it's from the 1st of July. Most economic commentators continue to say that we'll see inflation coming off after that second quarter. But of course, we look carefully at every piece of spending that we do to make sure that it's value for money. But one of the things I think we'd be selling New Zealanders short by is if we didn't do some of the long-term investments that are needed. We've got to look after the short term, of course. We've got to support people. We've got to be careful with our spending. But if we then in turn decide not to build state houses, not to build roads, not to invest in public transport, then we're selling future generations short.
Given how rocky economic data has been over the past couple of years, that's a
As I say, all I'm reflecting there is what most economic commentators are saying, but we always are careful with the way we put our budgets out. And bear in mind that we put budgets out, they're 4-year budgets. Expenditure rolls out over a period of time, but we're obviously aware that we are operating in the same constrained environment that others are in terms of things like building supplies and so on. The other factor that I think will change too over the course of this year is the availability of labour supply, and that's certainly affected some of the issues we've seen, for example, in the price of food and so on. And so I think as we see New Zealand open up, more people coming in here to work, you'll see some of those issues addressed as well.
Are you really arguing that the fuel tax cut has had an impact when it was for 17 days?
As I say, a small impact, yes, and the full impact of that is yet to be seen. So, yes, I do.
You definitely had a significant impact on the inflation.
I think it potentially has kept it under 7%, yes.
Have you received, obviously the numbers backwards, have you received any advice or estimates about what inflation might be currently running?
No, I haven't got a particular estimate on that. As I said, most economic commentators are talking about the idea that we'll maybe see a peak in the second quarter. That's on an annual basis. Whether the quarterly basis might come down a bit, we'll have to see, but no, I don't have that data.
What promise can you make to Kiwis who are paying more and more of the tab across the board?
Well, the promise I can make is that we'll continue to look after New Zealanders as we did through COVID and as we have with the package we put out on the 1st of April. We've got the winter energy payment coming in on the 1st of May, and we'll always look for ways that we can support New Zealanders. But the other commitment I make is that we'll focus on making sure we have a properly functioning health system, education system, that we're building houses, and that our priority is not tax cuts for the most wealthy in New Zealand. That's the wrong thing to be doing right now.
You keep pointing to the winter energy payment. This is not just low-income New Zealanders feeling the pinch, it's middle New Zealand that is struggling. What are you doing for middle New Zealand?
And as I said earlier, the fuel excise duty is something that saves all New Zealanders when they go to the petrol pump. You yourself have just pointed out that the full impact of that won't be felt until we move further through this quarter that we're in now. So we continue to provide ways of supporting New Zealanders. We've got to make sure we're clear, though. In our system, we have monetary policy. The Reserve Bank is responsible for keeping inflation between 1% and 3% over the medium term. They are using the tools that they have. If I can finish my sentence, they are using the tools that they have. That's important. We, in turn, make sure that our spending is targeted, it's careful, and that we make sure that we're doing the right thing by New Zealanders. No, and again, I said I agreed with that, and that's why we favour more targeted policies. So when you look at what we did on the 1st of April, what we're doing on the 1st of May, we're targeting our fiscal support to the people who are the most affected by inflationary increases. What the National Party is proposing is tax cuts that value those who earn the most. That is not targeted fiscal policy.
It's not really a political fight we're having here, though. It's what are you doing for middle New Zealanders? Middle New Zealanders want to know what you're doing to help them, not what the National Party.
But you're actually contradicting yourself in the two questions that you've just asked, because Adrian Orr is saying he wants fiscal policy to help monetary policy to be more targeted. That's exactly what we're doing. What the National Party is proposing is untargeted fiscal policy that would benefit those who earn the most. We think we're actually doing exactly what Mr. Orr is asking for.
On building materials, the Finance Commission is obviously looking at the price of building materials. Do you think that's why New Zealand is not enough competition?
Yes, I do. I think New Zealanders pay more for building materials in a similar way that we pay more for our groceries than many of the countries that we compare ourselves to. It's the reason why we did the inquiry into supermarkets, and it's the reason why we're doing the inquiry into building materials. I would say that in the meantime, we've been working through the construction sector accord to see that whether we can find new product lines, different ways that we can get products into the country. But I do believe this is an area where a more competitive market would serve New Zealanders a lot better.
Given that nothing has changed after the supermarket inquiry, and some argue that they didn't go far enough, do you have any confidence that the Comcom inquiry will make any difference?
I think, to be fair, we've only recently received the supermarket inquiry. The government's still working its way through the detail of the recommendations, and we will be responding to those soon. So these things do take a little bit of time. We do know when it came to the similar inquiry into petrol, we did see those margins come down, albeit petrol rises have occurred for other reasons. So I do think this is the means that we've got. We've funded the Commerce Commission to undertake these market studies. They didn't have the capacity to do it. We changed the law, and it is up to all of us to follow through. So let's get a clear picture of what's happening in building supplies and we'll follow up on it.
But given how long that takes, and you just said yourself that we're still the government about supermarkets, it's not helping people right now.
Well, clearly we can't do things, at the click of our fingers when it comes to this. We have to get the information and we have to find the places to intervene. But I'm sure those involved in the building supply sector are well aware of our interest in this. And as I said before, there are other issues there too, which are not necessarily just about competition. They're actually about supply chain constraints. It's cost 10 times more to get a shipping container from Shanghai to Auckland now than it did before COVID. We've seen massive disruption at ports in China through COVID and through shutdowns there, and that's also having a major impact in that building supply area. Those things will improve in the nearer term, then the inquiry will come through.
Have you done everything you can to keep government spending under control?
I believe that we've got a really careful and balanced form of government spending. There is always more things asked for than we're able to deliver. We've kept net debt at a level that's low comparative to the rest of the world. Our spending as a percentage of GDP is about the same as it was when the national government came through the global financial crisis. And if you look at my record as a finance minister, up until COVID, we were keeping debt down. We used that debt to get New Zealanders through. And come the budget, I'll come back with a new set of fiscal rules, which will show New Zealanders that we will continue to keep a careful balance. What I'm not prepared to do, though, is austerity policies that would suddenly cut spending on health or education, and that's what the National Party have to answer. If the priority is tax cuts, what else goes?
Will the public sector pay freeze remain in place for the next 2 years?
The public sector pay guidance is being reviewed. You'd need to talk to Minister Hipkins about where that process is up to. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.